Coming up on this episode, dissecting James Harden's trade to the LA Clippers and the potential implications for the Golden State Warriors, plus 5 major takeaways of the Warriors season to date as they move to 3-1 through the first week of the season. Yes, welcome back to the Golden State with Mates podcast on what is a Wednesday night for me here in Australia. Middle of the morning for most in America, but this episode will be out bright and early before the Warriors play the Kings. Later on tonight for Americans listening, still tomorrow for me. But the Warriors have had an impressive start to the season, moving to 3-1. Before I get into some major takeaways, let's get into the biggest news of the past 24 hours, apart from the remarkable ending to the Spurs-Suns game that I'm now a couple of hours removed from. If you haven't seen the ending already, go and watch that. Basically, Suns up by 20 in the third quarter. Spurs come all the way back. Wemby hits a jumper with 48 seconds to go to reduce the margin to 3. Suns miss on the other end. Wemby gets a putback dunk from a Devin Vassell missed 3. And then off the inbounds, the ball goes to KD. The ball is snatched away by Keldon Johnson, who then goes in, makes the layup over Josh Okogie to give the Spurs the lead with 1.8 seconds remaining. KD's jumper at the buzzer after the timeout is no good. That was the first time with 1.8 seconds to go that the Spurs had led in the whole game. Absolutely remarkable. Crazy finish here. Unlikely to see anything like it ever again. Let's be honest, KD, I think, was fouled on that snatch away from Keldon Johnson, but refs didn't call it. Play on. Spurs win. Good news, I suppose, for the Warriors, who are obviously battling with the Suns in the Western Conference. Hopefully, I would imagine that both teams would be vying for a top 4 seed, let's say, if not higher, at the end of the season. So a good result, I suppose, for the Warriors. Let's get into the big news that I did say, though, and that is the James Harden move to the LA Clippers from the Philadelphia 76ers. So the trade was Marcus Morris, Nick Batum, Robert Covington, KJ Martin, and multiple draft picks going to the Philadelphia 76ers in exchange for James Harden and PJ Tucker. OKC got involved there with a future first round pick as well. But I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of the trade and who won and whatever else, because I'm sure you've already listened to other podcasts that have focused on that, or you can go and check out other podcasts. I'm specifically wanting to look at it from a Warrior standpoint and perspective, how this makes a difference to them, of course, because they'll face the LA Clippers 4 times during the regular season and then potentially a playoff battle down the track as well. I think from a Clippers standpoint, this is a good move. I would say they won the trade. Again, I won't go into detail on that, but I would say they won the trade. They're clearly better, I think, and at the very least, they are a better regular season team. They are James Harden comes in and he's a floor raiser to what they can do this season. Because if you have some injuries to Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, which based on history is bound to happen, then I actually think this is a team that was, potentially a play-in team, a team that may have missed the playoffs based on how competitive the Western Conference is. Now, bringing in James Harden just increases your regular season floor, I think. I'd be incredibly surprised from here if the Clippers weren't to get a top 6 seed, and I think that's been confirmed based on their early season form as well. Now, we'll see how Harden fits in, but I do think for the regular season, he is going to be able to provide them with great production in terms of scoring and playmaking. We know James Harden was an all-star last season. He's still a highly productive player. I do have issues and concerns come playoff time, obviously, with the fact that you've got James Harden and Russell Westbrook in a team that's got Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. And I think come playoff time in the clutch moments, you are going to want the ball in Kawhi Leonard's and probably Paul George second, those two guys' hands in the big moments. And if that is to be the case, then what are you asking James Harden and Russell Westbrook to be catch and shoot threats, to set ball screens, to cut to the basket? Like, are you asking them to do those things? Because Harden might be a catch and shoot threat. He's not doing the other stuff. Westbrook's probably not doing any of that stuff. So I have serious question marks on how much you can play those 4 guys together and how effective that quartet, I suppose, will actually be. Specifically the Harden and Russ combination, because, again, if you are going to have one of those guys off the ball, I do question how effective those guys will be. So come playoff time, like, what are you going to do? You're going to play Harden for 30 minutes a game and Westbrook for 18? Like, is that the case? I suppose you could do that, but that's probably going to be less of a role of obviously what Westbrook will want and what he's had in his tenure with the Clippers going back to late to last season. So I do have question marks on their playoff ability, I suppose, with Harden. I'm not sure it necessarily makes them better come that time of the season, but again, this allows them to kind of ease Leonard and George specifically through the regular season, knowing that if those guys, one of the two or both players are out on any given night, they've still got a pretty decent chance to win because we know you can still put the ball in Harden's hands and he can go to work and make plays for you and still be, the orchestrator of an offense like we have seen from him for the last 10, 12 years. Now, maybe he's not the player he once was, but he was a very effective player with Philadelphia last season. There's little doubt about that. So, again, better regular season team now. The Clippers, they're going to be hard to beat in the two meetings against LA for the Warriors. But I think come playoff time, with both teams currently constructed, I would still feel pretty confident about how the Warriors will be able to perform against the Clippers, specifically based on the Clippers' history in terms of the playoffs in regard to Leonard, George, their health, Harden and his underperforming nature in the players and how that trio fits along with Westbrook as well. But it'll be a wait and see, and it'll be certainly interesting, that is for sure. Let's jump into the main takeaways from the Warriors season to date through 1 week, 4 games, 3-1. Really impressive. And I think even the most optimistic of Warrior fans wouldn't have necessarily expected this start with 3 of the 4 games on the road. Of course, they're on a 3-game winning streak now. Obviously, the disappointment of the season opener against the Suns going back to last Tuesday night, but then the 3 road wins in a row. Sacramento, 122-114 at Golden One Center on Friday night. Sunday night, the Rockets 106-95 at Toyota Center. And then on Monday night, the New Orleans Pelicans getting the job done absolutely incredibly. Like, I thought the Warriors were a genuine chance of losing that game, probably more than a 50-50 chance to lose that game. They go out and blow out the Pelicans 130-102. Brandon Ingram not playing for the Pelicans, obviously, but that was kind of offset by Klay Thompson, Jonathan Kuminga, 2 guys that are probably going to combine for 50-plus minutes usually. They were out, so pretty even, I suppose, in terms of the lineups and the players available. I know the Pelicans were missing a couple others, Trey Murphy the third, Jose Alvarado, they're big pieces for them as well, but still, a 28-point win for the Warriors was mightily impressive, that is for sure. Let's get into some takeaways from the first week of the NBA season for the Warriors, and it would be remiss of me not to start with Stephen Curry. At the end of the day, every other player on this roster that the Warriors have can do whatever they want. If Stephen Curry isn't an MVP level player, then the Warriors aren't going to be in championship contention. That is simply the facts. And so for him to come out and show what he's shown over the first 4 games, 2 40-point games, 33.5 points per game on ridiculous shooting splits of 56, 47, 92, he's still the engine of the Warrior offense. And it has been unbelievable to see a guy that's in year 15, is 35 years of age, play in the manner that he has. It has been remarkable. I think myself, as a podcaster, I'm happy to put my hand up to this. I think other content creators as well, particularly when we're looking at specific teams like I am with the Warriors, I think we have a tendency to kind of overlook the normal and focus in on the new exciting stuff. So if you look at the off-season, pre-season, up until this point, I know I've probably most talked about Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody, even the rookies, Brandon Podziemski, Trace Jackson-Davis, because those are young, exciting pieces who we don't know what they're going to be now and in the future for Golden State. And so there's a lot of debate on, a lot of analysing on what those players could be. And it's exciting to talk about. There's little doubt about that. And in the meantime, we kind of forego the likes of Stephen Curry because we see what Steph is doing and we just think, oh, well, he's done this for 10 years in a row. It's nothing new. That's the case, but it doesn't mean that it should be overlooked because this is special. This is greatness, and we have to appreciate this greatness while we still have it. And it is absolutely amazing, and I just implore every Warrior fan just to soak in as much of this Steph Curry game, this Steph Curry form, these Steph Curry performances as you can over the rest of this regular season and for the years to come, because this is truly once in a generation. You're not going to see this again, and he has to be the major takeaway because, as I said at the start, the Warriors are not going to be in championship contention if Steph Curry's not an MVP level caliber player. And based on the first 4 games, like him and Luka, I think, might be the top 2 in MVP. Like right now, I know it's like 3-4 games. It's super early, but it is absolutely unbelievable the kind of shot making that he's producing right now. The efficiency that he's doing it. There's a couple of things here, like his 402 threes, the record for most triples in a season. Is that under threat? Maybe. If he were to break that record, then that goes a long, long way to winning NBA MVP. And of course, if he does win NBA MVP, he will break the record for the oldest MVP, which is currently held by Karl Malone, who won it at 35 years of age in 1999. Steph turns 36 in March, so if he can do that, that would be quite remarkable and would be a testament to him, a growth to his legacy. I think he's now kind of cemented himself as probably a top 10 player of all time, and he's only going up. And if he were to get a third MVP, the oldest of all time at 36, I tell you, like we're going to have some conversations at that point. We're going to have some conversations. So that's my first takeaway. Second is, in fact, let me kind of lead into the second one. So Steph currently is averaging 4 assists at the moment, which is well down on what he has produced in the last few seasons, where he's been around 6.5 over the past few seasons. And obviously Chris Paul coming in is a big factor to that. When CP3 is out there with Steph, he can play off the ball a lot more, become more of a catch and shoot threat, become just generally more of a scoring threat rather than necessarily needing to play make for others. I think we will see those assist numbers go up throughout the regular season with the way NBA defenses are going to be trying to stop Steph, trying to make other Warriors beat them in terms of scoring the ball. So I think that will go up. But clearly there's been an impact from Chris Paul here, which then goes through to the second unit as well, which has been a huge success for Golden State so far. I don't think that anyone in their wildest dreams could have imagined Chris Paul coming in and having this kind of impact this early with the Warriors. I think even those that were optimistic on the move would have thought that this will take some time to kind of gel together for the two different styles of the Warrior offense and Chris Paul's pick and roll offense to mesh together effectively. And that just hasn't been the case. It has worked perfectly to that. Now, there's room for improvement, and I'll get onto that in a second. But this has been an unbelievable start for Chris Paul. He's plus 45 in 4 games. He was plus 39 in the back-to-back games in his first 2 career games off the bench. Remember, 1,365 games without coming off the bench. 1,365. His first 2, plus 39. Plus 22 against the Rockets in the 11-point win on Sunday. Plus 17 against the Pelicans on Monday night back-to-back. He has been fantastic for the Warriors, and he is leading a bench unit, which I've said for probably 10 episodes in a row now, 10 podcasts of those 10 post-game lives. This is a Warrior bench unit that should be top 5 in the league at a minimum by the end of the season. They're currently third with a plus-minus of plus 9.9. Now, look at the contrast between now and at the same point last season. The same point last season, the Warrior second unit, the Warrior bench, minus 14.5 plus-minus after 4 games. Now, we know the youth movement that the Warriors were trying to get going at that point. We had Jordan Poole, James Wiseman, elements of Moses Moody, Jonathan Kuminga, JaMychal Green was in the mix, Dante DiVincenzo, all these different types. And ultimately, it just didn't work. It did not work. And now you have a 38-year-old veteran point guard who's been around the block plenty of times, who knows what he's doing on every offensive possession, who can control the game in a way that the non-Steph Curry minutes have ever been controlled before. And this is a unit that is both effective offensively and defensively. You've got Paul running everything offensively. You've got the scoring talents of Kuminga, the offensive skill set, the passing, the shooting of Dario Saric. You've got Moses Moody, who's developed into probably the third best three-point shooter on the team behind Steph and Klay. And you've got the defensive tenacity of Gary Payton II as well, who is really leading the defense off the bench with what he's been able to do in terms of steals and stuff like that. And the likes of Kuminga with his athleticism and length contributes to that as well. Moses Moody's first 4 games, I don't think I've ever seen him more active off the ball defensively, getting in passing lanes, making steals, making plays. He's been unbelievable on both ends. And so this Warriors second unit is completely flipped from what we saw at the same point last season. And they are going to be able to win games for Golden State on their own accord. There are going to be games when the Warriors starters get outplayed, but they simply win because of the bench. And we've seen that at times already. We go back to, the last 2 games. Houston, the first half, that's 8-9 minute period with Steph Steph on the bench. You have the Warriors second unit a plus 16 in that time. Now, yes, they needed Steph in the fourth quarter to come in and do what he did with the 4 threes on 4 straight possessions, 14 points in the fourth quarter to eventually get the job done over Houston after they'd made a pretty significant comeback and taken the lead. That happened, yes, but the Warriors still don't win that game without that 8-9 minute stretch in the first half with Steph on the bench when Chris Paul absolutely was able to control the game perfectly, and the Warriors on both ends were so good. And then you go to the Pelicans game where Steph, builds a bit of a lead for the Warriors in the third quarter. But again, Chris Paul, led second unit, is able to extend that lead to a point where Steph's able to come back in, put the finish. I'm not even sure Steph had to come back in, but he came back in, was able to put on the finishing touches, finishes with 42 points. Absolutely unbelievable. But then you get to a point where you blow the Pelicans out by 28 and you can rest your guys down the stretch, which is pretty important in a long season. So this bench unit has been absolutely fantastic, and Chris Paul has been the leader of that. My third takeaway is the defense and rebounding. So this was the biggest concern for the Warriors heading into the regular season, right? You're looking at the roster. You've got no one over 6'10", like Dario Saric is your tallest player at 6'10". You've got Draymond out for the first couple of games of the season. How are the Warriors going to be able to hold up? Well, they've done perfectly right now. They've done more than what you could have expected. I think through the first 4 games, as I said, Draymond out for the first 2, 20 to 22 minute restriction for the next 2. You would have thought if the Warriors can be an average defense in that period, that's a good result. Well, instead, they've been 6th in defensive rating, 4th in defensive field goal percentage. Again, better than you could have ever expected. Rebounding-wise, 8th in rebound percentage and 3rd in rebounds per game. So why is that? I think it's just the buy-in, it's the cohesiveness, it's the vibes of the team right now where everyone is buying in. This is the stat I think that most showcases that. The Warriors lead the NBA in box outs at 11.3 per game. That's over 2 more than the second-ranked team. To me, that just goes to show that everyone is bought into the defensive and the rebounding end. There are some certain players that could certainly improve that's for sure. But generally as a team, this is one that knows that they are a bit smaller, and in order to overcome that, they're going to have to be cohesive. They're going to have to know what they have to do. They need to be versatile. They don't necessarily have the huge shot blocking presence. They don't have a guy that's going to engulf 20 rebounds, although Kevon Looney does sometimes have something to say about that. And so they're just all contributing, pretty evenly to a team that right now is one of the best defenses in basketball, and also is closing out possessions by being able to rebound the ball at a pretty high rate as well. So that's my third major takeaway. Fourth is, I want to get back onto some players here, specifically in regard to the Pelicans game, and that was Trace Jackson-Davis and Brandon Podziemski. So the stylistic fit of these rookies, and huge credit has to go to the new general manager, Mike Dunleavy Jr., who identified these 2 players, selected these 2 players in the draft. Obviously, Jackson-Davis came late on draft night in a trade for Patrick Baldwin Jr. as part of the whole Chris Paul, Jordan Poole deal, really in general. But Jackson-Davis against the Pelicans, 13 points, 9 rebounds, and 4 blocks. Absolutely unbelievable start for him. His first real extended minutes, I think he played 4:41 against the Kings on Friday night. He's developing into a player that is going to need to earn rotation minutes here. And it's going to be interesting for me, coming up in this Kings matchup on Wednesday night. Will Trace Jackson-Davis get minutes? To me, it's hard to leave a guy out of the rotation, even if Kuminga comes back, who's currently questionable right now. It's hard for me to see Steve going to TJD and saying, sorry, mate, you're out of the rotation tonight. Or I don't expect to play you unless there's foul trouble. Like, 13, 9, and 4 blocks. Now, there's some finishing around the rim stuff that I think needs to be worked on. I think he was, 5 of 10 from the floor in the game against the Pelicans. That game in preseason where he started against the Kings, I think he was 5 of 12 from the floor. There's some finishing issues there, I think, when he doesn't get the ability to go straight to the rim and go straight up strong with it. But he's got such quick bounce and quick movement that he can actually miss. We saw that one against the Pelicans where he basically almost threw an alley-oop to himself, but it was just it was a missed layup, and he was able to get back up and throw it down on the second attempt. He often with these missed layups has the ability to either put it back and basically pad his offensive rebounding stats, or be able to grab it, kick it back out, or tip it out, whatever it may be. He is developing into a pretty strong presence here early for the Warriors. And I don't want to kind of over-exaggerate things, and I'm sure opposition fans will think I'm absolutely crazy right now. But again, I want to just give credit to Mike Dunleavy Jr., and I tweeted out after the Pelicans game, Trayce Jackson-Davis is under team control for 4 years at a total of $7.6 million. $1.9 million on average per season. There's a chance he develops into the best value contract in the NBA. There really is. Who's making $2 million in the NBA right now who could foreseeably be a 20 to 25 minute rotation piece in the next couple of years? Now, I get maybe there's young guys in the NBA who in their third or fourth years who are making $4 to $5 million. Yeah, okay, maybe who are all-star caliber players. I get that. But, I mean, recent high draft picks like Wemby, I mean, he's going to be on 12 million, 12, 14 million, whatever it is. But there's clearly first to fourth year players on rookie contracts who are going to be in that discussion as well. But it doesn't take away from the fact that Trayce Jackson-Davis is on an incredibly valuable contract. 4 games into a 4-year contract, yes, 13, 9, and 4 in less than 20 minutes of play. Just let that sink in for a second. $1.9 million a season. It is crazy. And then you've got Brandon Podziemski, who makes his NBA debut against the Pelicans, and like Jackson-Davis, looks like he's been in the league for a couple of years. There's no kind of debut jitters or uneasiness in any way. I'm sure there was some nerves, no doubt, but didn't show. Right. And the one thing about Podziemski is I actually think, like going forward here, I'd be surprised if he's in the rotation. Now, I think he's ahead of Corey Joseph. We saw that on Monday night against the Pelicans. The Warriors missing Klay Thompson, missing Jonathan Kuminga. Still, Steve didn't go to Corey Joseph whatsoever. So I think Podziemski will get playing time when CP or Steph or Klay sit, whatever else. But right now, full rotation, he's probably out of it, I think. At least in contrast to Jackson-Davis, who I think even in the full rotation should get some minutes. But the Warriors, let me pull this one out for you. The Warriors are currently third in paint touches, yet take the third least amount of field goal attempts from within 5 feet. The Warriors' whole basis, right, is to get into the paint, kick out to open shooters, or if it's post-ups and split cuts, guys going to the basket, or Steph or Klay running around screens on the perimeter. Like, it's an inside-out game, right? That's exactly what Podziemski does. He is like the perfect style for what the Warriors want to do, because his ability to get into the paint off the dribble is remarkable for a first-year player at 19 years of age. It really is. Now, I have some concerns with his finishing ability, and oftentimes he's kind of got to be really crafty. He doesn't necessarily have the athleticism to go up strong and finish layups and dunks or anything like that. Like, he's going to have to be crafty with his footwork in the paint, with his kind of finishing. His floater, I think, will definitely need to improve. There's all that, but just the ability off the dribble to get into the paint for a young player in a team that is basically what they want to do. As I said, the stats says third most paint touches in the league, third least attempts from within 5 feet. They want to get to the paint and they want to play inside out. That is the Warriors' style. And Brandon Podziemski is literally the definition of that with the way he plays. So again, the stylistic fit of both these players is unbelievable. Back to Trayce Jackson-Davis, and just in terms of his playing time, I know CP loves playing with Dario. I get that. Dario's offensive skill set is a perfect complement to CP in terms of his shooting and his passing, his ability to make decisions off the roll, pick and pop, whatever it is. That's great. I actually think that Trace maybe should take some of Dario's minutes, simply because we know CP thrives with a role threat who can go hard to the rim and who can be a lob threat. Dario's not that, and we haven't really seen much pick and roll between Paul and Kuminga yet. So if it's not going to be Kuminga, I think Jackson Davis could actually play a role, maybe play 7-8 minutes a game alongside Chris Paul. You could even have, we saw this against the Pelicans, you have Dario out there even playing at the 4. Now that complicates matters, with Kuminga coming back, I suppose, and you want Kuminga to play in that as well. But there is a genuine push here, I think, that Trace Jackson Davis should be playing 7-8 minutes a game, based on what we saw against the Pelicans. Now, things will change across the course of an 82-game regular season, but this is what you get with a 23-year-old rookie, 4 years at college. He's just so far advanced than what we've seen from young Warrior centers in the past. And there's already been the comparison with James Wiseman. There has. And it's unfortunate, to be honest, but it's just going to be the case. The Warriors' history with recent young centers has been really poor since Kevon Looney over the past 7-8 years. But now they've got a guy who looks like within 2 years maybe he could be a genuine backup big that plays 18 to 22 minutes a game. And that is huge with the 57th overall pick. And right now, Trace Jackson Davis is a more impactful player to winning than James Wiseman ever was. Now, I think James Wiseman still has much higher upside, much more talent than Trace Jackson Davis. I don't think he'll ever get there now. I think he's 4 DNPs already with the Pistons. It's unfortunate. It is what it is. But we have to remember James Wiseman in his rookie season, he did some stuff where you're like, wow, what have we got here? I still remember the game in Detroit when he blocked a Mason Plumlee attempt, got the rebound, dribbled down the floor and into a Euro step dunk. And I thought, have we got Giannis here? Have we got another Giannis? He did some stuff, like his 3-point shooting was reasonable in that first rookie season. Like, he did some stuff where you're like, wow, he could be anything. But overall, the impact on winning was not there. He was a negative. He gets injured towards the end of the season. The Warriors go on a massive run. The Warriors don't miss him at all in the second season. They win the championship without Wiseman playing a single second through injury. So, at the end of the day, Trace Jackson Davis in one game against the Pelicans was more impactful to winning than James Wiseman was in any singular game that he played. I'm sorry. I think that's the facts. If you think otherwise, find me a game from James Wiseman that was more impactful to winning than what we saw from Trace Jackson Davis. But again, I don't want this to be a Wiseman hating session by any means. But it just goes to show you, again, what 23 years of age and 4 years of college experience can do for you. Because right now, Jackson Davis is just a more experienced player, and he's just flat out older than James Wiseman. So it's not surprising, is it? It's really not. Anyway, the last one for me, the last takeaway, the room for improvement and the optimism here that the Warriors are 3-1 on the season, and yet there's things that can be improved all over the place. And I'm sure there's stuff from a team standpoint, but let's just go through the individual stuff. Right, Andrew Wiggins, major concern right now. He's an issue. He'd be more of an issue if the Warriors were struggling and they were 1-3. Then there'd be real pressure on Wiggs. Right now they're playing so well that they can kind of play through Wiggs' issues, but the facts are that he's not closed 2 of the first 3 games, and then the Pelicans game on Monday, I don't think he would have closed. He didn't have to in the end anyway because they were able to rest their starters. They blew the Pelicans out, won by 28. But I don't think he would have closed either. So let's say it's 3 or 4 games that he hasn't closed. He's not part of the best 5 for Steve Kerr down the stretch. He's a concern. He's averaging 10.8 points and 2.3 rebounds on 39.5% shooting and 18.2% from three-point range. That's ugly. That's ugly. So here's a guy last season averaged, we know his season was interrupted, but he still was a solid player through his 37 regular season games. He missed 45. 17 points a game, 40% three-point shooting, more than 2.3 rebounds, that's for sure. And the defense is yet to get back to a point that we saw in the 2022 playoff run where he looked like one of the best perimeter defenders in the league. So I actually think the defensive side of the ball might be more important because I think the Warriors need that more than necessarily scoring. Right now, the Warriors scoring, even with Wiggs averaging less than 11 points, actually looks pretty good because of what Chris Paul can do for you off the bench in terms of being a facilitator. And the scoring of Kuminga, the shooting of Moody, the offensive skill set of Saric. The defense, I think, for Wiggins is probably more important than the offense. But even if he can just go back to being that dangerous catch and shoot threat guy that can move off ball, finish at the rim. Some of his misses at the rim have been really disappointing. 9 points on 4 or 5 shooting in the second half against the Pelicans was an improvement, but it's probably going to have to take some time here before he gets back to any kind of resemblance of what we saw in the 2022 playoff run, if he can at all. And obviously, fingers crossed he can. He still should be in the prime of his career. But, I think it's important to note that he just simply hasn't played that much basketball. He misses 45 games last season. Doesn't play for Canada at the World Cup. He's ramping up here. So it's a wait and see. Klay, I want to give Klay some credit because his second and third games I thought were actually pretty good. A lot of people would be giving Klay some criticism based on his preseason form, based on the first 3 games. His second and third game, he had 18 and 19 points on 7 of 12 shooting in both games, I think it was. Solid, right? Like, I don't think it's not the explosive Klay Thompson that is capable of getting 8 or 9 threes and 30-plus points in a game. But if he's just doing that on a consistent basis, what he did in the second and third game, that's probably okay. Right. I think his post defense has actually been pretty good. The move of him to kind of defending power forwards has worked pretty well. Now, he's going to be guarding better power forwards as we go along, but there's not too many better than KD. And I thought he did a good job in the season opener against the Suns. I think he's making putting more of a focus on his rebounding. He's averaging a career high in rebounding right now. So the facts are he's shooting 47% from the field. He's shooting 40% from threes, a career high in rebounds. His plus minus is really good. Like, he's got the least usage of his career right now. Some of his playmaking has been okay. Some of his decision-making has been really good in the last couple of games. So I'm not actually as concerned about Klay Thompson as what other people are. However, he can still obviously have those games where he makes 8 or 9 threes and has 30, 35 points. We haven't seen that yet. Hopefully that can come soon, and can be more momentum and confidence back in Klay's game moving forward. Chris Paul is having this impact where, as I said before, he's a plus 45 in 4 games without shooting the ball well at all. So I just imagine when Chris Paul actually starts putting the ball in the hole. Like, he's shooting 40% from the floor and a grand total of 6.3% from three-point range. 6.3%. Imagine if he gets that up to 30%, which is well below league average. Like, if you can just get that to 30%, imagine the impact that he can have. Like, he's been that good and that impactful while shooting the ball really poorly. Now, against the Pelicans, he goes 6 for 10, makes his first 3 of the season. A few great mid-range jumpers, patented mid-range jumpers in the third quarter to really kind of extend out the Warrior lead and basically secure the victory at that point. So he started to get things going a little bit from a scoring standpoint. I think when he had 13 points, that was a season high for him. That's not necessarily his goal. Like, he doesn't need to score 15, 20 points, but there are going to be games here where he does get it going from the field and he can have the odd 20-point game here and there. The Sixth Man of the Year conversation will come into effect. I think it's already starting to come into effect. But again, if he shoots the ball a little bit better, gets his point average up to 13, 14 a game rather than 11, 12, I think he's probably got to be one of the favourites, doesn't he? So there's plenty of room for improvement there in Chris Paul. And talking about his kind of pick and roll, pick and pop tandem with Dario Saric, well, Dario is currently shooting 27.6% from the floor. Some of his finishing around the rim, again, he's not necessarily a guy who's uber athletic and he's going to go up strong with it. He needs to be more crafty. We get that. But some of his finishing around the rim has been disappointing. Like, he's getting into those positions where he can finish. He's just not making them pay. So I'm interested to see what happens with Dario moving forward, whether he can correct that. He's not going to continue shooting 27.6% from the floor. Like, that'll clearly improve. But I do wonder whether or not some of his minutes could be shaved off in in favour of Trace Jackson-Davis, who I think deserves minutes after his performance against the Pelicans. So just a watch there on Dario Saric, who's, again, like Paul, has been good. Like, I've got no issues with Dario Saric right now, aside from the fact he's shooting 27.6% from the floor. And again, that's just going to show what more impact he could have than what he currently is, because he's part of a second unit that is thriving right now. Talking of the second unit, Gary Payton II is another one. He's currently shooting 33% on corner threes. Wide open attempts. Wide open. Now, I spoke about it the other day. If GP2 can't get to high 30s from three overall, surely he can get to high 30s on corner threes. I think he did it last season. Again, interrupted, no doubt, through injury. But he's so good defensively that if he can just start sticking his corner threes at high 30s, close to 40%, Steve's already said it. Like, he needs to get Gary playing more. And that's only going to be solidified if he can start hitting those corner threes at a higher rate. Because he's out there with so many scoring threats that defenses are just living with GP2 wide open corner threes. Like, that is... You don't want any NBA player basically to be wide open at any point. But with the threat of the Warrior offense right now, that's what defense is going to be left with. Leaving GP2 wide open in the corner. Can he start making them? Draymond is obviously a key player for the Warriors. He's still ramping up on that 20 to 22 minute restriction right now after missing the first two games. I think defensively, he's come straight back in and been fantastic. Some of the stuff he did with Zion in particularly that second half against the Pels locked him up. And Zion, we know, is one of the most unstoppable forces in the NBA. And Draymond really gave him some trouble. And so the fact that he was able to do that, I mean, should we be surprised? He's one of the most versatile, one of the best defenders in NBA history. Like I was going to say the last 20 years, I think he's the best defender of the last 20 years. I think he's the most versatile defender of the last 20 years. And he is one of those best defenders of all time. Like, he just is. And so we shouldn't necessarily be surprised. I think there is some stuff offensively where he's probably a little bit out of sync at the moment. Some of his finishing around the rim, which again, like GP2 in his corner threes, like Dre getting to the hole and making his layups is going to be important. He had that kind of airball floater, which was slightly embarrassing against the Pels, but it'll come back to him. And he's an important cog for the Warriors. We know that. And he's going to start ramping up here and just be better and better, hopefully, as the season goes along. And I guess the other one is Kuminga, right? So he misses the Pels game, which is unfortunate. He's probably like the last person you want missing games because he's young and you want him to get some consistency, to get regular playing time. He's going to get that, obviously, as long as he's fit and healthy, which unfortunately he's got that knee concern at the moment. As I said, questionable against the Kings on Wednesday night. But some of his stuff, his first two games were good. The Rockets game was a little bit less impressive, but there's still some of like the foul troubles, the boneheaded turnovers, just general decision making with him, which is still a question mark, and he's still got so much room to grow and so much improvement left in him that it's still like that is one of the biggest aspects for the Warriors moving forward in terms of as a team what they can do throughout the rest of this season and even next season. You know, a lot of that is based on where Jonathan Kuminga can get to, and based on the first three games that he's played, there is still plenty of room to grow for Jonathan Kuminga, plenty of room for improvement. And so, again, he's one to watch as the season goes along, because I do think that, you know, the Warriors' championship chances could be dependent on what Jonathan Kuminga can do for them and whether he can get to being a 20-25 minute player for the Warriors come playoff time. But anyway, there's my 5 major takeaways. Steph Curry, of course, the bench unit and what they're doing so far, the stylistic fit of the rookies, the way Golden State are defending and rebounding at a far greater level than what was expected, and just the general room for improvement in this team. Warriors-Kings, Wednesday night, I'll be back to do a post-game live for that one. De'Aaron Fox, a massive out for the Kings after rolling his ankle against the Lakers in that overtime victory on Sunday. So the Warriors, as a result, will be big favourites in this one. It would be disappointing if they were to miss it. Klay and Dario are both probable for that one. As I said, Kuminga is questionable, so we'll wait and see there. But Fox out. You know, a few of the questions here, question marks for this game, you know, where does the Kings offense come from without De'Aaron Fox, who obviously had 39 points, had 22 in the fourth quarter in the Kings' comeback effort that fell short against the Warriors at Golden One Center on Friday night. Malik Monk had 11 points in that overtime against the Lakers in that 5-minute period, basically led them to victory without Fox. He's going to be one to watch from a Warriors standpoint to lock in on defensively. I think you'll see GP2 get that assignment off the bench, assuming Monk remains in his six-man role. I think the Warriors did a pretty good job making him a playmaker, making him a passer on Friday night. They're going to have to try and do that again. He did have 6 assists, but at the end of the day, they limited him to 9 points. You don't want Malik Monk getting off the chain and scoring 20 and 25 because that's going to give the Kings a legitimate chance of victory. We know the struggles that Domas Sabonis has had against the Warriors going back to the postseason. He's going to have to step up for the Kings in order for them to win this one with Fox out. And I suppose the combination of, the wings, Kevin Huerter, shooting the ball really poorly to start the season. Got going a little bit against the Lakers on Sunday. And then Keegan Murray and Harrison Barnes, who combined for 26 points on 21 shots against the Warriors on Friday. They'll be looking to bounce back from that as well. Other than that, how are they going to be able to stop Steph, who's now combined for 92 points across his last 2 games against the Kings? Expect more double teams to come earlier from Mike Brown. We saw it happen kind of late in the third quarter, in the fourth quarter on Friday. Worked somewhat effectively. So we'll just wait and see kind of how that pans out and whether Mike Brown tries some different stuff on Steph earlier in the game before he really heats up and gets going. But it's a tough task to guard Steph Curry at the best of times, let alone when he's in this kind of form with 2 40-point outings in his last 3 games. We'll finish it up there. Nice to get a little podcast kind of out of the way in between games before we get back to the post-game lives here, starting with Wednesday night's battle against the Kings. Thank you for anyone who's got through to this point. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, if you could do that, that would be greatly appreciated. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you would like to tweet me, I'm at POK252, POK252 on Twitter. Other than that, guys, hope you can tune in to the post-game live against the Kings. Come and have your say in the comments. I'll read them out, hoping for another Warrior victory to hopefully move to 4-1 on the season.